Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to what I was going to call the Back Pew Podcast, because that is an amazing name, but turns out it's taken since 2016, so I don't know what to call this now. But the premise is me and a guest who is your favorite atheist content creator. We sit down and we watch sermons about atheism. Today's guest for the first episode, in chronological order, is Godless Cranium. Say hi.
Okay.
And we have Professor Stick.
Hello.
Hi. And before we dive into it, how are you guys doing? What's new in the world of YouTube atheism? What's going on with you guys?
I don't know. I just did my live stream yesterday, first one, so that's pretty cool. I don't know if you guys saw it. Did some atheism stuff.
I completely missed it.
Yeah, I saw the
I thought
beginning. I had to go.
Damn it.
I thought you were a science guy, not atheist guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I started my channel going like, I'm gonna just do atheism, and then sort of it just kind of went away from that. I don't know. I respect you guys for being able to stick to this topic for so long. I feel like I kind of lose patience if I just talk about one thing for so long.
Yeah, and I was kind of curious about that. So, Godless Cranium, why don't you branch out to other topics?
I have kind of like at certain times I will
Yeah.
I've done some a couple of political videos. I've done some historical videos that were kind of linked to had religion in it, but it wasn't really about religion. It was more about the
Yeah, but
topics.
yeah, but it seems like your channel is largely focused on religion. Do you think that that's just what your channel is about? Is that like your vision for your channel, or is that mostly like what you think is important?
I think is important.
Yeah.
I don't feel like, because I'm Canadian, I don't feel that I'm qualified to really talk about politics, and I don't feel like too many people are going to care about Canadian politics.
I see.
So I do enjoy talking about it a little bit, and I do more enjoy talking about like social things that would transcend whether you're American or Canadian. Like, for instance, on Twitter right now, I'm just kind of like talking about the movie thing, about Scarlett Johansson, the trans, backing out of the movie for the trans, playing a trans character. Just stuff like that, like, social issues that I think kind of thing that I think are
Yeah.
interesting.
I knew you're Canadian. I didn't know it would like affect your audience that much. Okay.
It's good to stick to one topic anyway, because people subscribe for like, they expect the topic that they subscribed for. So I mean, if you talk about other things too much, you might lose some of your audience.
Yeah, and I saw that because my last 3 videos, I post one a week, so the last 3 weeks I've only talked about the flat Earth.
Oh yeah.
And there were a couple
I
of
watched all of them.
yeah,
And I was like, holy shit, it's not gonna end.
yeah, and there was a couple of people who got mad about it. Most people didn't seem to care, but a couple of people were like, you keep talking about the flat Earth, and there are a number of reasons why I did that. But this being one of them, now I'm talking about religion on a podcast. Hopefully, it'll be a podcast. But yeah,
I feel like I have thought about, and I still want to do this, is kind of move into other topics as well about like the supernatural or like conspiracy theories and stuff like that. So I guess flat Earth could fall under that, but it's all kind of linked to that. Would still be comparable to religion, right? Like it would be pretty close to
yeah,
offshoot topics, I guess.
Yeah. Also, I mean, flat Earth is like the hot topic right now.
yeah. I didn't.
Stay away from it.
Yeah,
Myself.
yeah, that's another reason why I chose to branch out a little bit. I'm not good at branching out, so it's pretty much just been a little bit of Islam and a lot of flat Earth. But there's not as big of an audience for YouTube atheism anymore. So talking about like conspiracy theories and stuff like that, it gives you a lot more. It gives you a bigger audience.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, if you just talk about atheism, you're kind of limited by the number of people that are going to watch you, I guess. That's sort of how I see it, I guess. If you branch out to more topics, you have more subscribers. So it's kind of a risk, I would say, if you're willing to take that risk. As long as you don't branch out to topics that are way out of, like, completely irrelevant to what you started your channel for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you do the podcast as well, which explores all kinds of other topics? So,
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And
thing.
yeah, with your podcast, did you find it difficult to pick a name? Because it seems like every single podcast name that's good is taken. There's even a podcast called Everything's Taken Podcast. It's about video games, but they couldn't find a name, so they just said Everything's Taken.
That's cool. No, I don't know. Mine might have been taken. I don't know. I just thought.
Oh, you didn't even bother to
talking-
check.
I didn't even check. I just I was talking to Shin. And I was like, "What do you want to name it?" And then I was like, "Hey, how about Heathen Hour?" And she thought it was. Okay, well, that's
a
the
good
name.
name.
So, yeah.
Okay. At any rate, if any of you guys are interested
Soccer,
in
fuck
the,
him.
if any of you guys are interested in these guys' channel, and for some reason you're not already familiar with them, links to their channels are in the description below. But without much further ado, let's dive into the sermon, or two, depending on how fast we get to it. Here, I believe this was titled something weird. It doesn't matter. Let's go into it.
That leads to atheism. 10 minutes. Here we go. All right. So what about, so we've talked about belief in God, gods, spirits, supernatural realities. What about those who believe only in the natural? No God, no gods, no spirits, no such thing. So debunk a few myths about atheism.
Okay, it might seem like he's trying to talk faster than he actually can, and he's sort of mumbling and slurring his words. That's not going to stop. That's going to continue throughout this whole thing. So we're going to have to get used to that.
Oh, all right.
One, let's debunk the idea that atheists believe in nothing. Atheists have their beliefs. So whether or not you call atheism religion, it's clear it's a belief system that's at work in an atheist's life. Everybody lives according to some sort of belief. So it'd be myth that they believe in nothing.
Yeah. We
It's not a system of beliefs. It's a stance on one thing. I hate. How many times do we have to tell religious people this? Like, it drives me freaking crazy.
Exactly. They're still saying this. And everybody except atheists, or people who call themselves atheists, are the ones saying this.
Sorry, go on.
We've been saying this for a while. Atheism is not a system of belief. It's a lack of belief. If you look back to just any philosopher, atheistic philosopher, somebody who calls himself an atheist, they will say that atheism is a lack of a belief.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they don't listen at all, and I feel like it doesn't really help their position at all. Like, even if so-called atheism, even if, let's say it's true that atheism is a belief system, you're sort of just making it feel like that they're trying to sink us to their level. I mean, at the same time, why does that even matter at all? Even if atheism is a belief, it's not going to change our position. And even if it is our position, like, why is it that you get to determine what our position is and why it's like a belief system when we should be determining that ourselves?
Exactly. And I think part of the reason is, well, what we're watching right here. They're preaching this in churches, and for a lot of people, that's all the information they get of atheists. It's preached and taught by people like this guy, and it's just perpetuated. And like kind of just makes the atheist's job harder of getting people to understand atheism.
We're bad, but you're just as bad, is basically what they're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to say, though, that philosophically, you could say that atheism is a belief. Like, it depends on which definition you're taking, right? Like the colloquial, whatever definition, or the philosophical. But yeah, I just wanted to, because I know some people get bent out of shape, and so a lot of I feel like that's the reason why we'll like argue with the atheists and be like, no, it's not just a lack of belief, because they're going with the philosophical definition of atheism. I'm fine with the philosophical definition. I'm fine with saying, yeah, I don't believe that there's a God, but some people aren't comfortable with that. So it's.
Did you get that from Steve McRae?
No, actually, I just knew that before. Steve McRae, but Steve McRae brings it up a lot. But
Oh yeah, yeah, he certainly does.
I hate arguing over the definition. So I just like if somebody says like, oh, it's a lack of belief, I'm just like, okay, that's cool. Like basically,
Yeah.
you're saying the same thing, right?
Yeah, and I personally find it difficult because I personally believe there is no God. So it's kind of hard for me to say, oh, it's a lack of a belief in a God, but I don't believe in a God. So I'm arguing over semantics, but I'm going to defend myself anyway. But yeah,
I always say for the same reason. I could just say like if they say, well, you're just a lack of belief atheist, I'll say no, I'm not.
right.
I'm not. But
Yeah. But if they make it out to all atheists believe in atheism, then atheism, is a belief, and that can be taken down just as easily as theirs can. But I believe he's going to go further into depth in all of this. So let's continue.
Nothing. It would also be a myth that atheists have no morals in life. So we're going to talk in just a minute about atheism lacking an objective basis for morality. But that doesn't mean all atheists are immoral or don't have morals, understandings of right and wrong by which they live.
I can agree with that. Again, he's going to go further into depth in this, so we don't need to discuss that right now.
And then third, all atheists are either communist, left-wing, or liberal. So
I think we are,
Did
though.
you say all atheists?
Yeah, I mean, are you left-leaning?
I am fairly far left.
Okay, Cranium, are you left-leaning?
yeah,
Okay, and so am I. Atheists are commies. I mean, it's
I'm
not a
not
myth, it's the truth. We're communists, guys. Let's just accept it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like one of the videos I put out was that communism is garbage. So I'm
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm not a communist, but I am left leaning for sure. Leftist, libertarian-ish.
Left libertarian. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what I would label myself. I'm sure if I looked it up, I could figure it out. But there is a bit of a trend where religious tend to be right, irreligious tend to be left, and there's a bit of truth to that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's no doubt that like most people who are atheists would tend to be more left wing. But then that doesn't mean that, there are definitely exceptions out there. I feel like the trend of SJWs on the internet lately has pushed a lot of people, including atheists, more towards right wing.
Well,
The last time I looked, I think the statistics were that around 70% of atheists identify as Democratic.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
yeah.
Yeah, but definitely not like. Mhm.
I was gonna say, I think that has more to do though with how, like, if you might be more drawn to like traditionalism and authority and authoritarianism kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like that thing. Whereas if you're an atheist, you might be more drawn to not, the opposite. So it might have less to do with like just the way your mind works, your brain works. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a
Not
guess.
to mention,
Just a guess.
not to mention that a lot of extreme like religious teachings are very like right wing ideologies. Like for example, like some heavily religious people would say, no to abortion, like abortions should not be allowed, and that's like a more right wing ideology. And other things, for example, not accepting the LGBT community because of religion is also sort of like a right wing, like really extreme right wing ideology. So I think they are connected somewhat,
Yeah.
which is why like some atheists they just don't like they don't subscribe to those ideas. Sort of like, especially a lot of atheists who actively come out and oppose religion, and then they see them make these sort of claims like no abortions and whatnot, and then they actively would take a stance against that. So that kind of pushes them, I guess, more towards left side.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense because if you're deeply religious, you have deeply religious values and you want to protect that and you want to keep previously held values, which is, conservatism. Whereas if you're not religious, you at least don't have that pushing you towards keeping your held values. And if you're, say, a free thinker or something like that, you'd very well be more progressive.
Yes,
You missed oh, sorry. You missed a super chat. I just don't want I don't want people to feel like they're wasting their money.
Oh, well, They are popping up on the stream, so they will be remembered forever. Seeker Mate
Okay.
gave me $10. I love watching you guys. A podcast is a cool idea. Thank you. I thought it was an amazing idea.
A little biased, though, I think.
Nah.
This teaching is predominantly atheistic. One could even argue in light of understandings of the basis of morality, atheists could be more liberal, open to different ways of living as a result of their beliefs, but it's definitely not true that any atheist is automatically communist, left-wing, liberal. It's entirely possible for an atheist to be right-wing, conservative, capitalist.
Okay, that's true.
So, who are atheists? What do they believe? So, sum it up. Again, it's a...
They just believe in nothing. We believe in nothing. We're just,
That's our belief system.
yeah. We believe
It's gonna go in.
everything's pointless, so that's it. That's our whole beliefs. Everything's pointless.
broad stroke, 1.6 billion people, but generally atheists believe there is no God, or there are no gods. Atheism believes that there is no God or gods.
No, it's without God. A lack of a belief in God. It's funny. Everybody who says atheists believe there is no God, they didn't get that definition from an atheist. They got it from a fellow Christian.
Yeah, it's just another attempt at shifting the burden of proof. I mean, not really anything new here.
Now, similar to atheism, not exactly the same, would be agnosticism, which agnostics believe it's impossible to know if there is a God or if there are gods. So the A here is before Gnostic, a term for knowledge, so you can't have knowledge if there is a God or gods. So practically though, agnostics mostly end up living as atheists. So most agnostics who believe that you can't really know if there's a God or gods don't then turn around and live like there is a God or gods.
Okay, a little bit more semantics. I'm not gonna try.
What this guy's doing is why I first began to identify as an atheist, because it seems like to me that a lot of religious people want atheists to say that they're agnostic, because then it's like, well, they're on the fence. They want those people to be on the fence rather than taking an opposing view. And so that was what originally, when I first started thinking about, God and atheism and agnosticism and all that kind of stuff, I started to think, I don't want them to think that there's a chance, like that there's a big chance that they're going to be able to convince me, right? I want them to understand that I'm not on their side, right? I'm not on the fence.
Yeah, and that's, come to think of it, it's been a long time since I've been religious, but that was a sort of tactic that they would try to get us to use if we were, witnessing to someone else, we called it, is that to sort of get them off of taking a strong stance and get to the point where maybe not, and that way we could give them all the proofs of what we believe. So this is definitely a part of that, saying, oh, you're an atheist, so you believe there is no God? How do you really know? Oh, so you're not an atheist, you're an agnostic, so it could go either way, right? But I don't think this...
That's exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like 50-50. They want to make it so it's like 50-50 when it's not. It's like 99.9 on one side and like 0.1 on the other, right? Like it's...
Yeah, exactly. And they keep saying this, and they keep saying, like, oh, you should use this tactic, but it never really works in practice, because we know the Christian ideas. Sorry?
I remember one time, I remember this happened to me back when I was in college. I remember I would be approached by certain religious groups that students would form around campus, and then they would basically hardcore question on what I believe. And back then I didn't really actively call myself an atheist, so I was just sort of like, yeah, I believe this, I believe that, and then they would kind of twist and go, oh yeah, so you're an agnostic then, so therefore you're not actually sure. And then after that they would start advertising their like Christian group to me. And then I remember during the time I sort of just bought it because I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess I'm an agnostic, but like looking back I was like, holy shit, they just completely just word played the shit out of me,
Of course.
and just
Of
like
course.
tricked me into getting it. I don't know, I feel like if religious people want to actually convince us to become like religious and whatnot, what they should do is they should just give us hard proper reasoning or hard evidence and whatnot. But it feels like the only tools that they actually have are just these sort of like plays on like semantics and stuff, and then ultimately kind of like tricking you and using logical fallacies to get you to join their side. And it's just so deceitful.
Yeah, it's because that's That's more or less how they think. Because you don't become religious by all of these arguments. Maybe there's a few exceptions. Maybe I'm wrong. But largely, it's a very emotional thing. So what they'll try to do is try to appeal to your emotions ultimately, because that's what drew them in.
Yeah,
It's also,
and
it's also to make it so that they can continue to believe without, because if they're facing somebody that is like on the fence or 50-50, then to them that's like, well, I could be I could be right, so therefore, I'm justified in believing this, right? Whereas if it's somebody that's like atheist or somebody like that, then that now they have to like start justifying,
Yeah.
right? Instead of saying, well, it's like 50-50. No,
Yeah, exactly.
it's not 50, not even close.
They turn around and functionally live as if there is no God or gods. So then, just to introduce this.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. You can be agnostic and atheistic at the same time. Atheism is about your belief, whereas agnosticism is about your knowledge. So if you don't believe in God, but you don't know if he exists, you're an agnostic atheist. If you know there is no God and don't say that he does exist, then you are a strong atheist, not a Gnostic atheist, because Gnosticism is something totally different. It's like early forms of Christianity, so it gets really confusing. But yeah, you can definitely be an agnostic Christian as well.
And people who usually call themselves agnostics are usually agnostic atheist.
Yeah, they just haven't realized they're an atheist yet. I forget. That's a quote from somebody. I forget from who.
Term secular humanism.
Sorry?
I was just gonna say, I feel like saying like, it just seems redundant for me to say I'm an agnostic atheist, because I'm agnostic about pretty much everything, right? Except for maybe I'm not agnostic about having a conscious experience because I'm experiencing it. But other than that, I'm pretty much agnostic about everything, right?
Yeah,
like,
and that's a very skeptical point of view. So pretty much just saying you're one of those skeptic types. That'll cover your bases.
Secular humanists apply atheistic, agnostic belief to a formal ideological system. So this is from the Council for Secular Humanism. For many, mere atheism, the absence of belief in gods and the supernatural, or agnosticism, the view that such questions can't be answered, aren't enough. Atheism and agnosticism are silent on larger questions of value and meaning. If ultimate meaning in life is not ordained from on high, what other meaning can we work out among ourselves? If eternal life is an illusion, how can we make the most of our only lives? As social beings sharing a godless world, how should we coexist? For the questions that remain unanswered after we've cleared our minds of gods and souls and spirits, many atheists, agnostics, skeptics, and free thinkers turn to secular humanism.
He's reading.
So,
because he's talking so fast, like it's
Yeah, and
it's hard
it's
to listen to.
it is. It's really annoying. He slurs his words. Basically, he was reading about secular humanism. He gave a basic overview. I don't think it was all right. It's an all right overview. I don't know if there's much to say about it.
I don't know how he thinks that agnostics can't have a view of what's ethical and what isn't.
I thought he said that
Might have misheard, I don't
it's
know.
silent on those ideas. So, secular humanism kind of steps in and becomes, I guess, what religion should have been, I guess is what he's trying to say. But
I can buy into that. That's true. Sort of.
yeah, it can be. That's pretty fair. It's pretty fair.
secular humanism is formalized atheism or agnosticism, characterized by a philosophical naturalism that affirms the natural, denies the supernatural. So according to secular humanism, nature is all that there is. As a result, knowledge is gained by scientific inquiry into the natural, not simplistic appeal to the supernatural. So use the scientific method to discover what's true. Don't appeal to anything outside of scientific authority. That would be unreliable. Scientific, not supernatural authority is superior authority. And
Okay, well, honestly, a lot of religious people always say, like atheists or secular humanists or whatever always just heavily rely on science as the only method that we can discover things, that's out there. And honestly, if you put it like the way that they word it, makes it sound like it's not good. But my argument, as like, I don't know, you guys know that I'm like someone who's like a heavily like I promote science a lot, obviously. So my opinion is that yes, if we're trying to find something in the universe or discover something that is in our reality, that's something that is previously unknown, then the scientific method is our best method because it is the most objective way to find. Well, at least it tries its best to be objective. In theory, science is like completely objective. So it is the best way to find out what it is, what there is out there in reality, as opposed to something like appealing to the supernatural, which isn't even scientifically related at all because science says nothing about supernatural things. Then it just kind of annoys me because they always they put up these two things as if they're equal, like the scientific method and also like appeal to like religion and whatnot, as if they're both equally valid in determining truth about the universe, and that's just clearly not the case.
Well, they're also philosophy, which a lot of atheists are into as well, right? Like I like philosophy, and I think it's a good way. It's a good way of trying to figure out what's true and what isn't. But there's limits to both, right? So a lot of times philosophy starts off the scientific process, right? Because you make a hypothesis, so that you might have. And you create a hypothesis, which would be philosophy, and then science takes it from there and tries to figure out if it's true or not, or whatever.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. And when I first became an
both have their
atheist,
place.
yeah. And when I first became an atheist, I was one of those die-hard science will tell us everything. All we need is science. We don't need nothing else. And it took me a while to like warm up to the idea, like, oh, philosophy actually does make sense. We can't, really zero in on what science can tell us. But if, the argument is that science becomes our religion, the thing is, if we give authority to science, the scientific method or scientific consensus, there's a lot more reason to do that than to give authority to a supernatural being or to a particular religion. Because... Yeah, we have reason to believe in the scientific method, and we don't necessarily have that much reason for any particular religion.
That's the thing that's funny to me, though, is that they go on about, like, oh, it's so stupid that they believe in the natural. Meanwhile, they're surrounded by the natural, and they're making it sound like it's stupid not to believe in, like, ghosts, and it's just ridiculous to me.
Yeah, but I saw this painting move. How can you explain that? It just fell. You think there's no ghosts? How are things falling all the time?
Yeah, I mean, it's also at the end, it's just like how they word it and stuff. The way they make it seem that like superstition is like something that's reasonable to believe in or something.
Yeah, or the fact that we give out authority to science.
Yeah,
because you don't want authority in God.
The human language is flawed that way. Like any language, you're gonna have connotations, like no matter what you say. So there's not really a way to avoid, having these connotations about like making things seem better than they actually are.
Yeah,
that's just something we have to deal with.
I'm wondering how long it's going to be before this preacher brings up triangles and trees. That's all.
Flowing from that philosophical naturalism is a consequential ethicism. Ethicism, so ethicism, which basically says ethics and morals are determined over time by results in culture. In other words, moral relativism. Morals are relative over time. So what may be perceived as right and wrong at one time may change over time and across cultures, which leads and results here refers to human discovery, human achievement. So as humans discover more truths, achieve greater heights, our ethics and morals evolve, they change.
That's one of the things that I've always brought up when I argued morality, like with religious people, is that, I mean, if there is objective morality, why does God just randomly start changing his mind as time passes? And if he does change his mind, wouldn't that make it subjective and not objective?
Yeah, like I don't.
And funny enough, he changes his mind to go in accordance with the culture that's surrounding it, and with the scientific knowledge that comes along with it, right? So,
and between the Old Testament and New Testament, he changed his mind a hell of a lot.
Yeah, like he's basically a different person.
Exactly. But it's not somebody trying to reform a flawed religion. It's God sending down a human.
Yeah, and also like morals and values are also different depending on which culture you're in. Like,
Yeah,
does
yeah.
God go like, oh, well, if you're part of this culture, I guess this is okay for you, or if you're part of this culture, you can't do this, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I always find that interesting when they bring up objective morals, because they're not objective. I don't get why they would think it is objective when there's so many people that disagree on so many things, but they insist that it's objective. Like,
Yeah, and
obviously,
then
it's different for different people, and that's the definition of subjective morality.
not to mention that, oh shit, I lost my train of thought.
You're
It
Somebody
does
welcome.
say
depend on it also depends on what you're calling objective, right? Like, so
something.
you could say that it's built on objective facts, such as like if I punch you in the face, objectively it hurts, right? So you don't want that to happen. So you could base that moral don't punch people in the face on an objective
Yeah.
fact.
Yeah, like,
But it's not objective in the sense that like because some super being told you so, that's the way it has to be, right? That's not that
yeah.
kind of objective.
And that's a bit
Yeah.
more semantics, because like I can define my own basis of morality, right? And I can make that more or less objective. And I personally do, because I'm that kind of person. I base my morality off of harm. But
Yeah.
the fact that, but I have to choose that. I have to make that my morality, and somebody can make his morality on something else. So in that way, they can be both objective and subjective, depending on the wordplay.
And then when religious people do bring this topic up and they bring up an example, they usually bring up like an example that is the most clear cut that everyone would agree on, and as an example of morality being objective. Like when they say something like, I know Prager, you would just instantly bring up murder or rape or something,
Nazis.
which like the vast majority of people, well, if not everyone, would agree is wrong. And then they would go like, see, therefore objective morality.
Yeah, but even that doesn't make
It's
sense.
built on murder. Their religion is built on human sacrifice. So
Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah, like-
even that doesn't make sense, because one of the big things you always hear brought up is Nazism, right? The Nazis were wrong, obviously. Everybody agrees with that. It's objective. But the thing is, there obviously are people who don't agree with that, and we know this because there were Nazis. Nazis themselves disagreed, and that's why we had that conflict in the first place.
And even
you could have
if,
just gone to Charlotte. You could have just gone to Charlotte, Phil, and saw all the Nazi flags there. Been like, there's still people that agree that Hitler was right. I mean,
yeah.
So one clear example of this in our culture would be marriage and sexuality. We've supposedly advanced in the increasingly secularized West. We've come to realize that homosexuality, bisexuality, transgender sexuality are right, not wrong. In fact, to say that those things are wrong now is to be wrong. So
Things can change.
it's my
Yeah.
my fiance said one time. I was talking about one of my clients, and we have like a pattern of saying things, and so like if I say something, he'll respond in a certain way. And she said, yeah, because you've been having that conversation for 2 years, like the same you've been having the same conversation for 2 years, right? But every once in a while something changes, right? Like a response will change and then it'll morph into something else, right?
Yeah.
And I to me that's kind of like morality, right? Like we as a human species, we're having this conversation about what's right, what's wrong, what's ethical, and for a long time we agree, and then gradually something changes, right? And maybe we learn something different through science. Maybe we reason our way to a different path of thinking about something, and then that moral norm changes, right? So
Yeah.
we've just continually advanced, right? Our morality. Like 300 years from now, they might look back at meat eaters and say, "Those people, look, how could they eat meat, right? Like, what didn't they know that was wrong, right?"
Right.
Oh yeah.
So-
Wait, you guys are both vegans, right?
I am.
I'm a vegetarian.
Oh, okay, close enough.
So
Okay, yeah, I do believe that eventually, in the future, however long later, that everyone will become vegan or something.
No,
I do believe that.
yeah. Well, I don't. It's so deeply ingrained in our culture. I don't think it's going anywhere unless there's like a huge sort of reformation.
You know what? You're kind of right, because there's the like, you know how food is like pretty much like an art, especially to people who, cook and stuff, and there's a whole
Yeah.
culture that surrounds food. So maybe you are right in that sense. Who knows?
Yeah.
But they're going to be able to. They can already grow meat in a vat, so
Yeah,
there won't
so
be any
eventually-
conscious harm. That'll change everything.
Hopefully.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully.
What was commonly held sexual morality 100 years ago is now different 100 years later, or 10 years ago, 10 years later for that matter. At the core, ethics and morals develop over time through progress and society. Or in the words of our current president of the United States, our ethics evolve over time.
I think this is old enough to be during Obama's presidency. I'm not entirely sure. I don't feel like looking it up.
So this is a picture of what atheists and agnostics believe, and this core tenets of philosophical naturalism. So how does this play out practically?
That's what atheists believe, guys. That's what we believe. That's just what it is. Church guys said so, of course.
Thank God
I
he
would be a
defined.
metaph-
Thank
I
God
would
he
be a
defined our
metaphysical.
position for us. Yeah, sorry.
Be a metaphysical naturalist, so yes, you'd be right on me anyway.
Yeah, and for a lot of, I think, skeptically minded people, that's pretty fair. But there are a range of beliefs for atheists and whatnot. It's really case by case.
And what I did is I pulled some examples from a positive atheism online forum. So these
Notice he said positive atheism online forum. For those of you who don't know, positive atheism is the same thing as strong atheism, which says there is no God, whereas weak atheism or negative atheism says we lack a belief in a God. So he was on this forum, I take it, about positive atheism, and yet still doesn't know that negative atheism is still atheism.
It's like he knows he's getting his data from like a specific group of atheists, and then not really acknowledging it, and then generalizing it to everyone.
Yeah, he's presenting it as the atheistic point of view, whereas
Yeah,
he
he's
just
aware of
said it's the positive atheist forum. I also never heard of a positive atheist forum. I haven't looked very hard, but I've never heard of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, forums for everything pretty much exist now.
Yeah.
are people describing how they became atheists, even from Christian backgrounds. Not to say that these people speak for all atheists, but I think their words
Oh, perfect.
take what we're talking
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, save.
about with atheism in ways that could seem just philosophical and make them very practical. And I do trust they represent different types of atheists in different ways. Again, not all, but I think they give us a glimpse into the worldview at the foundation of atheism.
Okay, well, never mind. Fuck me.
So for obvious reasons, I didn't use their specific individual names. I've given them names to try to represent some of their perspectives. So we'll start with Scientific Sam. So who are atheists? What do atheists believe? Hear from Sam. He says, after years of self-study in philosophy, religion, and science, I finally came to the conclusion that there are no gods and there never have been any gods. The whole God thing has been nothing more than an invention of humans looking for answers to the fact of existence. As I look back on the whole process, I wonder why it took me so long to reach this obvious conclusion. I believe the acceptance of the fact of evolution was the deciding factor in the conclusion that gods did not and do not exist. Evolution and the natural evil in the world settle the matter for me. There are still
I could
questions.
answer.
Yeah.
I could answer why it took him so long. It's because we're surrounded by cultures that, and although I hate that word privilege, but privilege and stop people from criticizing bad beliefs. So of course, if you're surrounded by 99% of people that, or 80% of people in states or whatever that all believe in a god, then of course you seem like it would be more likely that you would believe.
Yeah. And this also, I feel like this is either the stance of somebody who has long since become atheist and he's sort of really started to take a hard stance, or somebody who's like newly atheistic and he's kind of full of angst and has a bit to calm down.
Science may not be able to answer. I still wonder why there's something instead of nothing. The complexity of life still awes me. I miss the comfort of old legends. But in the end, I prefer the truth instead of lies and falsehoods, however cold the truth may be.
And he's gonna bring that up. Like, oh, do you really think that all this complexity could come out without an intelligent designer?
Jeez, yeah, like this. what was it, Scientific Sam? He's not really doing us any favors, especially when he just brought up the complexity of life still awes me. And I think from people who generally aren't really into science, life itself does seem very complex, but the more you get to know it and the more you understand it, it's not nearly as complex as it may seem, because we're starting to understand a lot more about what life is and how cells work and how organisms actually function. So that's sort of like that's why when religious people always say, oh, look at the complexity of all this, and then they would compare it to like maybe technology or something. My argument back to them is that, well, you see, I actually personally wouldn't say that life or cell or like, molecular cell function or whatnot is actually more complex than the technology we actually have today, like the internet or like computers and whatnot. Because, I think you're underestimating human achievements a lot by saying that, as well as making life and, biology seem like it's like so much more than it actually is. I mean, not saying that it's not great and it's not complex. I mean, like relativistically, I don't think it means complex in the way that they mean it, as if it's like beyond our, understanding.
Yeah, and I also think this may be a misrepresentation of a bit of a different view. Like, you see people like Bill Nye saying like, we don't believe in a God, but everything is still amazing. The whole we're made of stardust, and we can still get a sense of like awe and amazement from the universe and nature around us. But that doesn't mean there is a God. That may be a bit of a misrepresentation of that idea.
Oh yeah, like a lot of people who are science popularizers, they would generally, they would say all these really cool things to make science look really cool, and I'm all for that. I'm all for making science sound really interesting to get people interested in science. But then at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm also like, you're kind of cherry picking, these parts of science. And in reality, science isn't, it's kind of boring being a scientist. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's truth to that. If you really look at stuff, you can think, oh, wow, this is cool, this is amazing, this is complex. But when you're like studying it in depth, you kind of get burnt out after a while. So
Yeah, also depends on what kind of person you are.
Yeah.
So philosophical naturalism, scientific authority, superior authority, science has all the answers. Even though science doesn't have all the answers, I'm not going to appeal to supernatural for answers I don't have. I'm exclusively looking at science, the natural world. Scientific Sam. Then, moral Mark. Looking back on my youth, I realized I wanted to belong to the good, true, moral crowd. But what I found is that it isn't a moral crowd, and its teachings are not true. Religions are made up of lies and metaphors to scare their followers into practicing a certain kind of morality. Here's my conclusion. Man invented God. Man desires power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Man feels guilt, fear, and compassion. These are the tools that are utilized to brainwash the uneducated and weak into believing that they alone are the moral elite. Brainwashed individuals that are infected with religious belief then infect their children, and this perpetuates ignorance and superstition. Religion is just amoral intellectual slavery. My name is Mark, and I'm proud to call myself a moral atheist.
Yeah, and I feel like whoever's saying this, I guess, is generalizing religions. There are plenty of religions out there that don't really turn you into like an intellectual slave. Christianity is definitely one of those that's like, oh, deep inside you have to actually believe or do good and whatnot in order to actually, please God and go to heaven. But there are plenty of other religions out there. Some of them are no longer around that are like, your actions and what you show on the outside is what actually matters rather than what you actually feel on the inside. So I don't know. I think that is a bit of a generalization to all religions.
Yep. He also generalizes about how you have to it's for the intellectually weak. There's lots of intellectually strong people that are religious. I mean,
yeah, for sure. But then I can't really blame him, I guess, because especially I guess in the U.S., Christianity is the dominant religion here. So you kind of inevitably just talk about Christianity as like, I can understand those people who just treat Christianity as like the only religion out there.
Yeah, but it's also interesting because he keeps saying like religion is brainwashing and religion is lies, and with Scientific Sam he also said religion is lies, and I feel like I don't know, we haven't gotten to the rest of the names, but I wonder if he's going to focus in on say like, oh, atheists think that religion is just all lies. And yeah, I'm wondering if he's trying to make it. I think he's making it harsher than it really typically is.
Yeah, and he also probably cherry picked these quotes out too.
Oh yeah, of course.
Ones that make atheism look bad, I guess.
Yeah. If he didn't make him up himself.
Yeah. He's doing better than most preachers, though. I mean, I'll give him that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Is it a coincidence that just the people that he quoted just so happened to have alliterations as their usernames on this forum?
No, he said that he was choosing different names to describe them to hide their identities.
Okay, that makes sense.
So Mark, obviously disenfranchised by the morality or lack thereof that he saw in religions around him, so he concluded he doesn't need religion for morality.
You know, I don't really understand this stance. Like, there are some atheists who say like religion is completely amoral. There's no moral religion. But Hinduism and like the variations thereof, like Jainism and Buddhism, like I'm completely 100% for those religions. If you're a Buddhist, all power to you.
There are extremes for. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I'm just saying, I'm not for them. I mean, I'm for parts of them. Just like, I don't know. I guess you could pick out good parts of Christianity, but the parts that, like Buddhism, for instance, some of them, talk about like karma and reincarnation and stuff like that. I think that's nonsense stuff as well. So it's also has bad parts in it that are not true.
Yeah.
So it's just less. It's like a spectrum, right? Like I would put Christianity and Islam and to a certain extent Judaism, because it's the father of the two, on one side of the spectrum, and like Buddhism on the other, or like Jainism.
Yeah.
Even less violent. It's hard. It's harder to twist Jainism into a violent religion than it is to twist Christianity.
And there's always going to be extremes on pretty much for every religion. And I feel like if I'm endorsing that religion, I'm going to be endorsing those extreme. No, not really, I guess.
Yeah.
But
I
don't know.
I believe it was. I think like a radical Hindu who assassinated Gandhi. There are, radicals of any religion, and of course, I'm not saying that those are okay either. But what I'm saying is, like, in general, as far as morality goes, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism are the most moral religions that we have, apart from the extremes, which.
No, Hinduism's got like class system. Like
Hinduism.
Well, my understanding was that wasn't part of Hinduism, but that was a part of their culture.
I think it's part of their religion. You get reincarnated up or down your class depending on how you lived your life. Like the very bottom is like the untouchables, and then women are a class below men. If you're a man and you didn't do well in your life, you get reincarnated as a woman.
I was under the impression that wasn't part. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, and there's also like sects of Hinduism that practice like eating other humans.
Oh,
cannibalism. Reza Aslan actually, when he was in that Believer, it was a Hindu tribe that he ate the brains from or whatever. So,
wait, was that the story where the prions spread throughout that population and started killing off a bunch of people? Am I thinking of the right thing? Okay, never mind.
I'm not sure.
But Hinduism's definitely got its problems for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems. I wouldn't say they're one of the most peaceful religions.
Okay, well, just Buddhism and Jainism then. and of course, even if it's completely moral, there's also dogma and superstition, which I'm opposed to, but at the same time, I don't think we're going to get rid of those. So I would rather somebody be a Buddhist than, say, dare I say, Muslim.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever really get rid of religion in general. It's just people, as long as people use it to like form communities, around their religion and stuff, it's never really going to disappear.
Yeah. And I admire Judaism for that, because they've really, for the most part, gotten away from like the orthodox stuff, and it's become more of a cultural thing, and I think that's respectable.
It's also kind of arrogant, I think, a little bit.
How so?
I don't know. It feels like they're like, oh, if you're not part of us, you can't be one of us. And we're cooler than you. I don't know.
I can see that.
I kind of get that vibe off it.
Yeah, I can see that.
better off without religion. He can be moral with no appeal to religion, no belief in God whatsoever. Moral atheist. Then third, last one, insignificant Isabel, which sounds like a negative designation that I'm given to her, but listen to how she describes herself. Coming from a background in Christianity, she said, I'm grateful that I believed the stories of the Bible when I was little. This gave me a calm childhood without any earth-shattering events that made me grow up faster. Once I did grow up, I started studying the natural sciences. Then, after 3 years of intense studying, it was clear that my eyes were opening wide and that it would be impossible to ever shut them again. After my 20th birthday, I felt that I had finally grown into my skin and all my adolescent insecurity were gone. Now I was ready. Once my fear was gone, everything was easy to accept. First, there is no God. Second, I'm an insignificant part of the universe. Third, when I die, I'm dead. No ifs, ands, or buts. Fourth, there's no invisible super parent who takes care of me and guides me through life. It was a scary, naked feeling at first, realizing that I'm on my own and I better make the best of the one chance of that I have. I found out that there is a heaven, but not your everyday Bible-thumping heaven. My heaven is the circle of trust and comfort I've created with those close to me. Together we walk through life. No crutches are needed, and we stroll hand in hand down a short, bumpy road, pausing as often as possible to smell the roses as we gently approach the end.
So this is like the nihilistic approach.
Yeah. I mean, so what if I guess people just have to sort of just come to the reality that the universe just doesn't really care. There isn't really anyone that watches over us. And so far, at least from what we know, and that, whatever you do, it matters to yourself and it matters to your friends and your family. But outside of that, in the grand scheme of things, in terms of the objective view of the universe, it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's, it may seem like a negative way to view the world, but just because it's a negative way to view it doesn't mean that it isn't the case.
Yeah.
I mean, people arguing from emotion is just like, oh, I can't possibly imagine this, therefore it's not true. Like, the universe doesn't care about that opinion either.
I kind of agree, but at the same time, I guess a romanticized view of that could be that then if we care about each other, then the universe kind of cares, right? Part of it, at least, anyway. A small part.
Yeah.
But I know I know where you're coming from. Like the stars in space and all that, they don't care about.
Mm-hmm.
The meteorite coming towards Earth doesn't care about our well-being.
In the big picture, there's not much point to all of it as a whole. But now, I'm not entirely sure if these three people are supposed to represent how people become an atheist. I can hardly tell because I can't really understand what he's fucking saying. But
he said, I think he said earlier that he pulled some stories about some people who just came out of atheism or something.
Okay.
I mean, just came out of religion.
Yeah, but I find that, at least in, my view and views similar to mine, all of these are aspects of atheism or my mindset as an atheist. There is no ultimate purpose, but it's okay because we have an immediate purpose, meaning, and enjoyment in our lives. Yes, there is importance in science, and there's good reason, and morality is subjective, and we need to work with that. Those are... it's not like one extreme brings us to the conclusion. It's a combination of a lot of things, and it's more intricate than just picking out one thing that made us become an atheist.
Yeah. For this specifically, you should what the right mindset to approach this is what the reality is, and how can you make the best out of it, rather than trying to deceive yourself and trying to make that reality up, for yourself.
Right.
So Isabel, having grown up with at least somewhat of a Christian background, came to refute what she read in the Bible. There is no God. There's nothing beyond this life. There's only today, the here and now. I'm like every other piece of matter in the world, an insignificant part of the universe, destined to die, return to the dust. So let me make the most of the moments I have with the people around me. So each of these atheists, this is different perspectives, different journeys for how they came to atheism, but we got to think, not just in generalities, so individual people. How do we share the gospel with Sam, Mark, Isabel, or others who maybe like them in different ways? So,
well, here's the thing. Those are people who came out of religion. Chances are they already know the gospel. They already understand the religion that they were brought up in. And I always find it funny because, because I'm an apostate, I was never a true Christian. But I was a part of that true Christian crowd. This is true Christianity. I was a fundamentalist. And I thought just the same way they did. If anyone comes out of religion, no, they were never a real Christian, because a real Christian would never leave. And so, that really makes it difficult to like discuss much at all, because it's like,
It's difficult
everything you're
'cause
saying I believed.
it seems that religious people always, when they argue against atheists, they always seem to like to bring up like they like to give the impression that you don't really understand their religion or their holy text. So then, I think that's part of why they respond that way towards people who said that they used to be religious. And then they go, oh, but did you interpret the Bible correctly? Or did you do this correctly? And then whenever an atheist comes and go like, oh, the Bible says whatever, as an argument or something, they would say, oh, that's not really what it means. You don't fully understand our religion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh, your beliefs
We
weren't.
understand it. That's why we don't follow it.
Yeah,
We
but like,
understand it. That's why we're not Christian.
yeah, but your beliefs as a Christian weren't the same as my beliefs now. So maybe if those things were different, then you'd still be a believer, because then it would make more sense to you. You weren't part of the real Christianity.
Yeah, and in that sense, like, what exactly is a real Christian? Like, how can you say there's like one objective way to interpret the religion anyway? Like, you can't just assume that your own position is the correct way to interpret your holy text.
Yeah, well,
And then that everyone else is wrong.
like I said, I was part of the fundamentalist crowd. Like, the Bible is literally true, and we need to read it word for word and believe what we read. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that we didn't know there were other perspectives on the Bible. I didn't really know there's a historical perspective, that there were reasons why Catholics believe what they believe. Yeah, so it's kind of like they have one way that makes sense to them, and they can't really get why other people believe. But they have different Christian beliefs. They don't really understand why. So they sort of antagonize them that way.
Here's some exhortations. One, much like we talked about with Islam and others, create humble dialogue. Create humble dialogue. So don't feel like you need to jump right into a proof for the existence of God. Get to know people, where they're coming from, the reasons why they believe what they believe.
Don't jump into the proofs of God, because there are none.
Yeah, it's like, don't present proper debate with us.
Yeah,
Just get to know them and manipulate them instead.
Yeah, don't start a losing battle. We gotta kind of ease them into the idea. Just get familiar with them.
Don't start by shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, the average Christian on the street isn't going to be as well versed in Christian arguments as atheist YouTubers.
What they mean when they say they believe something. So when an atheist tells me I don't believe in God, I'll reply by saying, tell me about the God you don't believe in. If they start talking about a big Santa Claus in the sky who's keeping record of wrongs and rights, going to judge us one day based on them, I'll say, I'm with you. I totally don't believe in a God like that. And I'll say, can I tell you about the God I do believe in?
I hate that.
They shift the burden onto us to explain their God, and then they go, oh, that's the wrong God.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to go through every single God that I've ever heard of, or every interpretation of that God that I've heard of. It's up to you to say, look, this is what I believe, and then for me to say, okay, that makes sense, or no.
Well, I mean, this is part of the idea, like, oh, they had the wrong beliefs as a Christian, so now we got to get them on the right track. But it's also, it's kind of difficult, because when you're an atheist, and then you sort of understand or start reading about the God of the Bible or like biblical stories, then you start to really have a different take on God's character and what he's done and how moral he is or isn't. So a lot of the times when a Christian is talking to an atheist says like, oh yeah, God does all these terrible things. Of course the Christian doesn't think that way, and if the atheist is an ex-Christian, he didn't think that way either until he really started reading again from a totally different perspective. So, yeah, we do understand what you think God is because we have believed it. But our ideas have changed since then. And you're not going to, slip us back into thinking like, oh, yeah, he's the greatest thing to ever exist, because
it's the
we're
same
past
as
that
any
now.
book, right? Like, if I read to Kill a Mockingbird, and then Professor Stick reads To Kill a Mockingbird, and then somebody comes up and asks us, what did you think about this character? we might both come up with different answers, right? Because what I think about it, or how he comes across to me, that character, is different from the way it comes across to Professor Stick. So, it can't be like, well, what To Kill a Mockingbird do you believe in? Well, the one that's in the book, right?
Do we interpret it literally? Is it literal? Is it an allegorical? Do we interpret it historically? How do we look at To Kill a Mockingbird?
Yeah, in their mind, it's just completely.
I just had
Gone.
Station on Twitter where they're like, well, a never-ending torture, and they're like, well, we don't believe in torture. It's just a separation from God. Well, where do you get that historically? Because that isn't a historical Christianity, right? Like, that's just very recent that people started to say, well, no, this torture thing, not a good thing. Let's not do that. It looks bad on us.
Yeah. Well, there are a number of arguments to be made, believe it or not. It's all really confusing, and I don't completely understand it. But at first, Judaism didn't necessarily believe in a hell. They believed in more of a Sheol, a place where, souls go and then just nothing happens. It's just darkness and stuff. So there are a lot of arguments that could be made about what the Christian afterlife really was.
Or someone might say, I think religion.
Totally different.
Yeah, but yeah.
On it, but yeah, the Sheol in Judaism isn't the same as the hell that's described in like Revelations and stuff like that in the Bible.
Yeah, but there's also there's no real agreement on how to interpret Revelations either. Revelations is pretty much like a real shit show, but yeah,
are all the same. Instead of just jumping into a refutation of that idea, just ask, what makes you believe that? Like, find out why somebody believes it, because you obviously know it's not true. I think tonight, I hope, has made it abundantly clear they're not all the same. But what makes somebody believe that? What do they perceive about religions that causes them to lump them all in the same category? And hearing that answer will be hugely helpful in discerning how to share what's distinct and uniquely good about the gospel. Other people say,
so we
And I saw Holy Kool-Aid making comments, and they kind of look similar. This might be Holy Kool-Aid in there.
You're right.
Ooh. Is there something we don't know? It is I believe this is called the secret church. Is that the secret? Who are you really?
Anti-theist by day, preacher by night. Kool-Aid.
I honestly, I wouldn't blame them. Some of these big churches make a lot of money.
I think people are basically good. Which leads to, why do we need religion anyway if we're all basically good? Ask, really? And what about, and then you use an example, like Mussolini or Hitler, like the German Holocaust, terrorism and war today, kidnappers who traffic children for sex, all the people who commit these human atrocities. They're basically good. Like, do you really believe that?
I don't really know the stance that he's trying to argue against, but, everybody thinks that they're good. Everybody has their reasons for doing what they're doing. There are very few people who actually do harm because they know it's harmful.
Yeah.
So
he's also pulling out some really extreme things. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what he's saying is he's giving examples on why you can't really be completely moral without religion. Is that what he's saying? And then he gave those examples?
Yeah, well, the
It's a bad example considering the Catholic Church had pedo priests for.
Yeah,
that's not true Christianity. That wasn't what you really should believe. But these examples were he's sort of giving an example of how a conversation might go. How if an atheist says that people are naturally good, and he says, "Oh, all these things, how were they naturally good? They did terrible things."
Yeah, you're going to find extremes in everything, and I think just pointing out, if you point out non-religious people who did horrible things, it's just cherry picking.
Yeah, it's not the real religion. My religion didn't do that. That was that.
Well, whether you're religious or not, people are going to be able to rationalize things that are unethical, right? If you children attractive, you're going to try to rationalize it so that you can do what you want to do, right? Just as an example. But if your religion is teaching that that's a good thing, then that's the issue, right? Like, it's not
Right.
the issue that you did something immoral, right? But if your religion is like saying, look, slavery is good, God ordains it that we should be enslaving people, then that's the problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Humble dialogue, and as you do, to cause honest questioning. Tim Keller does a great job talking about this in the beginning of his book, Reason for God. But instead of always seeing yourself as needing to answer every question people may ask you about your faith, create humble dialogue that causes honest questioning about others' assumptions and beliefs. So a friend, neighbor...
Yeah, this is just back to get to know their roots, and then start to question, why they believe what they believe, and then challenge how they got into atheism to begin with, rather than just just fighting the beliefs itself.
Yeah. And I think there's a little bit of it can be a little bit worth it to do that, to like sort of, because like going back to like why a person believes any particular thing, how they started to believe that, and exactly really why they think that, that definitely could get people to start questioning it. But if it's like a very reasonable belief, then it's not going to do much. But
Yeah,
and
I think.
You go.
Oh yeah, I was just saying. I think for something like, I don't know, if someone believes, this is something like, maybe if we're talking about a specific ethical issue, or we're talking about like a decision making, like a hard choice that someone has to make, then yeah, going in and I think like going like, why do you believe that this is the right decision to make? And yes, I believe there is some merit in that. But I think believing in things about like about reality, I suppose. I think for that, convincing people, it's much more merit to just come in and present hard facts and evidence, and use logic instead of actually going in and asking why do you believe that 1 + 1 = 2 or something like that. Like I think something like that, if it's, especially the more obvious it is, it's less, the less black and white it is, the more it is. I think it's better to believe, to ask, where they're coming from. But for something like this, I think there may be a bit of merit, but not nearly as much, I would say.
We also base a lot of our morality on intuitions, right? Like, we can't necessarily, or basically our feelings, right?
Right.
Like, eating a dead person, right? And most of us would be like, we have an instinctive reaction to say, yeah, that's wrong, right? But if you start diving into like, why is it wrong, right, which ethicists do all the time, it starts to become less fuzzy, right? Or like, is having sex with your sister bad, right? Well, most of us have an intuitive, like, yes, that's bad, that's not good. But ethicists will like sit there and philosophize about why it's bad. Like, is it bad? So if you took away, like, if there was no chance that they could have children, would it still be bad? You can add different hypothetical things into it, right? So, ethics isn't easy. It's hard.
Yeah.
But they want to just boil it down to like, God said this, so that therefore that's the way it is, right?
Right. Yeah. And with what he's doing is saying, don't confront them directly with like the evidence they demand, and sort of get to understand what they believe, what they did believe, and sort of get them to question their beliefs that way. Yeah, that is so much easier to do. It's a far easier conversation to have than to confront them directly and give them evidence that would satisfy them, because they don't have that, or at the very least we're good at arguing against it.
Quain says, God doesn't exist. Instead of immediately going on the defensive trying to prove that he does exist, why not start by asking, can you prove that God doesn't exist? Which no one can do. Atheism is totally unprovable.
How do you know God doesn't exist? Yeah, let's do that. Stick, how do you know God doesn't exist?
Well, in terms of any God, I don't know that there definitely isn't a God anywhere out there. But for the Christian God, I feel like we've heard this so many times, and through the scientific method, we've dismissed these claims so many times that you just keep bringing it up. Like, at this point, it's just like I just roll my eyes and go like, well, your God probably doesn't exist, and I could say, I guess I'm 99.9% sure that your God just does not exist.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna ask about some like God out there that maybe is watching us but doesn't really give a shit, then maybe that could be the case. But there's no way to actually prove it, so there's no way to actually there's no reason to believe in it. It's sort of I like to stick to the scientific method a lot. So
yeah.
You could just ask them, how do they know Allah doesn't exist, or how do they know Odin doesn't exist?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
They would just be like, well, yeah. Like,
just go like, do you believe in Vishnu? And then they go like, no. And then we go like, that's how we feel like when we say that we don't believe in your God.
Yeah.
To say that God is not there. If I was going to say that something is not in this room, I would have to have searched this entire room to see if that thing was here. And once I've searched the entire room, I would be able to say, okay, it's not here. So in order to say that there is no God, that means you have to have searched all knowledge to see if God is there. And if you've searched all knowledge, that means you have all knowledge. And by definition, that makes you God. Therefore, you deny your own divinity when you don't say that there is no God.
If you say there's something not in the room, if you say something's in the room, and then you say, well, that something is invisible and it can do anything, and you take away any way of being able to verify that it's not there, then
it has an ethereal existence, but it's there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason we have this method on the burden of proof, right? If you're the one making the claim, you're the one who has to prove that that thing is true. I mean, because for certain negatives, like this one, for example, there's absolutely no way to go out in like the whole fucking universe and then search every corner and then learn everything there is to know about the universe and determine that there is no God out there is just highly unreasonable.
Yeah. But you don't have you don't have to do this at all. You don't have to search the entire room to know that there is no monkey in that church. Well, no, of course humans are technically monkeys, but there's no ape going around slinging poop. How do you know? You're not everywhere in that church at the same time. But it's unreasonable to think that.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, you can't do it.
That's my best monkey noise.
Sound like a duck call.
So,
Right?
that makes sense. 12:30 at night. So anyway, it's unprovable. So another way to get to that point might be say, why have human beings throughout history believed in the supernatural? I mean, it certainly seems like atheism is contrary to human nature, that there's something inherent in human beings to look to the supernatural. What causes that? Where does that sense come from?
Superstition.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with his statement that people tend to look towards the supernatural. I mean, I think it's a sort of tendency that people have, and I don't know. I think when we think of the supernatural, we think of things that are beyond our control, and that kind of instills some sense of fear in people. And I think a lot of what people do are actually driven by fear. Scientifically speaking, fear actually triggers a lot of the pleasure centers in your brain, and I think people look towards the supernatural, and they sort of get a high out of it.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
It's also to reassert control, right? Because, like, say, way back in the day, the bubonic plague happens, right? They don't know why it's happening. Everything, they don't understand why anything is happening. Why is that thunderstorm happening? And so, how can we assert control over that thunderstorm, right? So make the rains come. Well, let's do this dance, and oh my God, it worked. Like we have rain. Right?
Yeah,
like it's just a way of explaining something they don't understand, right?
Yeah, and that's sort of making correlations with like rain dances and actual rain. That goes down to superstition as well. But also, it's far easier for a human to think that there are other humans or human-like beings behind things that we don't really understand. Like, angels, gods, demons, we all think of them as like human-like beings because that's what we're familiar with. And to think that that's what's behind all of this, it makes so much more sense, especially to someone who, came before a time where science really explained all this. It's far more easier for us to understand.
Yeah, and
I even run into this.
Go on.
Go ahead, sorry, Steck.
Okay, Cranium, you go.
I also run into this, like even in a micro way when I play games, right? Like I play competitive PvP, and I'll be on a team with subs who are obviously atheists like me, and I'll say, okay, we're up like 2-0, we're gonna win the next one, and they'll be like, hey, you're jinxing us, don't do that. Like that's a microcosm of the superstition, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, and we actually do that a lot more than we think we do. Like even the smallest things, like the example you brought up.
Yeah.
Again,
we think like that. Like when they say it, it's like it surprises me sometimes. Like I'll be like, what? There's no such thing as that. What are you talking about? Like,
yeah.
Maybe it might, like for example, in your case, maybe it could affect you psychologically when you're so confident that you're gonna win, and then you start choking.
Yeah. And that sort of connection between things that aren't actually connected, we humans are very good at seeing patterns where there are none. And maybe that's why we look at the supernatural, because we need an explanation.
The goal here is not to establish irrefutable truth, but just to cause honest questioning in such a way that once those questions are asked, the journey toward truth can begin. So generally create humble dialogue, cause honest questioning, and then specifically think about how you share the gospel with Scientific Sam. Someone believes in evolution.
If you're sharing the gospel with Scientific Sam, speak science. Give him some scientific evidence for your God. And, if you have arguments for the science in the Bible, I'm sure he's heard it already,
Yeah, and like religious people, they always go like, oh, you're always expecting this evidence, and then you're always moving the goalposts. But in reality, what we really expect from religious people when we ask them for evidence is, I don't think they can fathom how low our expectations are already. We're just asking, like, for example, you're making such a massive claim about a God, and he determines everything. It's a massive claim of for the universe. And if we were doing something like this, and we made such a massive claim in like maybe theoretical physics, we would have to go through years and decades of proving it over and over again from different angles and whatnot. And all we're asking is like, just give us one thing. And our expectations are already so low.
Yeah, and that's often confused with, stubbornness. Like, oh, nothing will convince you because you're not convinced by all of this already.
Well, just saying that this God triggered the Big Bang alone is one big, massive claim.
Yeah,
it is.
But then they add on a whole bunch of other claims, and then like Judaism is a huge claim, a whole bunch of different claims in there, and then you added on even a more dumb religion like Christianity. It's just been added on top, right? Like it's just been like, oh, let's just add this bull crap on top and made the claims even more. And then Mormonism came and added more crap on top of that, right?
Yeah.
It never ends.
It's like a shit skyscraper or something.
Yeah. But I mean, all of this makes sense to them, and when they confront us with it, and we're like, no, that doesn't make sense, we're having none of that. They get frustrated, like, oh, nothing will convince you. You're stubborn atheist, you just hate God.
Yeah, it's also the way that they actually think. People think in different ways, and there are ways that are distinctive to different groups of people. Like, for example, people who are scientists would think in a way that would make sense in the scientific method.
Mm-hmm.
But people who are religious would think in a way that this, like something so simple, could actually convince them. It is sort of the pattern I see. People who are religious, or especially people who are like conspiracy theorists, they hear like, this one thing that just sort of kind of makes sense a little bit, but even if they don't get any evidence or whatnot, they just instantly jump on that train. And I think that has a lot to do with the way they're thinking, is as if they have this presupposition on what they're expecting to hear.
Yeah.
But to be fair, though, there are like Christian scientists that also like think in one way, but then turn that off and go to somewhere else, right? So
yeah. It's Christian scientists. People always, when I talk to religious people in real life, they always bring that up, that there are scientists who are Christian. And the way I would respond is, one, scientists compared to the general population are half as likely to be religious, according to the statistics I saw.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, the way that they think in terms of their religion, these scientists wouldn't use religion to determine, the way that they actually live. is like even though they are religious, they still have the type of thinking that a normal scientist would have.
Yeah.
What would they use their religion for if not to inform how they live their lives?
Well, they could like, in terms of using their religion, what I mean is the religious way of thinking, I suppose. So their scientific, like their scientific discoveries or their scientific works are not going to be influenced by the same type of thinking that they would impose when they are, you know, in their personal lives using religion to determine their lives and stuff.
Yeah.
It's very different. For Christian scientists, I would like to believe, at least, is that they have like a switch on their brain that they sort of switch on, you know, the scientific way of thinking when they're doing science, and then back at home.
Compartmentalize, right?
Yeah.
Their religious beliefs away from the scientific method.
Yeah.
Natural evil in the world. Science may not answer all the questions he asks, but why not start with exploring some of those questions to ask that are pretty significant. How did creation begin? How was creation caused?
I like the word creation. You know, obviously he doesn't believe in creation, but how did creation happen? How do you explain creation? Do you not know that science has an explanation for that? Do you not know that?
You want to say like, well, you don't have an explanation and we do, so therefore we're one step up on you, right? But
Yeah.
the real step would be to say, look, we don't know how that happened. Let's try to figure it out. Right?
Yeah, but I mean, for some things, we do know how it happened. Like, we understand cosmology and evolution. Maybe we don't completely understand, say, the origin of the Big Bang or abiogenesis. But that doesn't make God more of a reasonable explanation.
Yeah, it's really important to take a humble approach when it comes to science. Like you have to, you gotta admit the things that you don't know, things that you do know. You know, you can say you know them, and you could take those for granted. But things that you don't know, you can't just fill in something to explain them. Because if you can satiate your curiosity towards anything, then you're not really going to have the drive to actually go in and discover things. And that would be like instantly, you know, human, you know, science and knowledge isn't going to expand, and that's horrible.
Yeah.
That's the thing too, is that like Christians don't want to admit that they want evidence too. But if you like, as soon as there's any kind of like thing that verifies something in the Bible, like some kind of evidence, like historical evidence, just say, they're all over that shit, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
like they're no longer going, well, we just faith is the best way to do this. No, they're like, whoa. Let's show everybody this, right?
Yeah, but when I was religious, I was part of the camp where if something was found, like, oh, here's proof of this one thing in the Bible, it's historically accurate, then we would all go, you know, see, look, we told you, they have Jesus's shroud, we told you, it happened.
Yeah,
There's a thing in the chat that that I hear a lot from religious people, that like James Lewis is saying, gravity is an invisible force, but you ridicule God. So I think that's like something that's it's good to address, because we can tell that gravity exists, right?
Yeah, we can measure gravity. We've observed gravity, or at least the effects of it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, if God actually like made some physical effect on the world that we can attribute to him, then you know, then you have a point there. You have a case.
Yeah.
It's nothing like gravity, where we've even mapped out a bunch of equations and stuff. I mean, just because it's invisible doesn't. That's so stupid.
Yeah.
Produce the results over and over. Like we can land small things on asteroids, you know, a million miles away from Earth, using gravity, like the mathematical equations that come with gravity, right?
Yeah.
We can't do that with God. We can't. You can't go, okay, there's a math equation that'll tell us how to do this because of God, right? There's.
Yeah.
Thing.
You know, we can use gravity, we can predict it, and we understand how it works. But when we try to do the same thing with God, you know, pray for patients with heart disease, it doesn't affect anything.
A lot of cases, your chances go down of surviving. So
yeah.
Just so you guys know, I have to leave in like 5 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. Do you want to go now or just wait the 5 minutes?
Well, we'll wait the 5 minutes.
Okay.
I have 5 minutes.
All right.
The focus on the beginning. So even with evolution, There was a starting point with something. So in the beginning, why was there something instead of nothing? And from those questions to cross bridges that point to creation and a divine creator as at least one possible answer to the question of where the world came from. A creator to whom creation seems to point, Psalm 19. So
Yeah, God is one explanation for
Yeah, he is one
for the
possible
beginning of the
explanation.
universe.
Yeah, don't rule him out.
It's
He's
one
a possible explanation.
But the fact that there are alternative explanations would completely invalidate, well, not completely invalidate, but it would sort of dismiss the claim, and we wouldn't give any value to it until we can single out which explanation is it. The fact that there's like tons and tons of explanations out there, just because it's one explanation doesn't give it any value.
Yeah, and we already have a few explanations that are almost certainly true, like Darwinian evolution. We know that happened.
Yeah.
God didn't just make us, but it's a possible explanation. No, not really anymore. You see, and that's the thing. This is this.
Falsify evolution, right? You can't falsify God in most cases.
Yeah.
I mean, some you could, but
Right. And this is sort of a thinly veiled God of the gaps, There's you can use God to explain this, but we have used God to explain it, but now there's a better explanation. Oh yeah, well, how did that start? You can use God to explain that. And, God gets pushed a little bit further back. How did the universe get here? I don't know, it's God. Oh, well, we discovered, the Big Bang. That's a thing. Well, God started the Big Bang. Just push him a little bit back.
Yeah, we're pushing God to a corner here, and eventually when we do figure out, what caused the Big Bang, they're gonna go like, well, God caused the thing that caused the Big Bang.
Yeah, of course.
It just keeps going back.
He was the prime mover. But and it's got to the point now where God has hardly done anything at all. We have explanations for a lot of stuff. So even if he did cause the Big Bang, if abiogenesis was caused by God, he hasn't done much. And a God who hardly does anything, and a God who doesn't exist, they're not terribly far off.
just to bring that to bear on the question of beginnings, suppose scientific evidence shows that the universe began to exist in a great explosion called the Big Bang 15 billion years ago. Many are impressed for the evidence for the Big Bang, but the ultimate question is not what happened, it's what caused it to happen.
Of course, because you can always say why. Okay, or how. How did this happen? Okay, well, it started with this. Okay, how did that happen? How did that start? And using this argument like how, like a 5-year-old isn't very convincing.
Yeah, and we can turn the argument around and say, how did God come to existence?
Yeah. I always find it interesting how, something had to exist eternally, so that thing had to have been God. Well, why couldn't
To be fair though, that the reason when they say the unmoved mover means that it doesn't have to be moved. It doesn't have to have a cause.
Yeah, but why couldn't...
That's what they're saying, right?
Yeah, but
the logic is, if we can't apply that logic to your God, why are you able to apply that logic to science when we're claiming something caused the Big Bang, and then you ask about that one thing, what caused that?
Yeah.
So if we can't do it to your God, you shouldn't be able to do it to us. It's sort of what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, like Spinoza's God was like the universe is the uncaused. That's the uncaused cause, right?
Yeah, exactly.
A God.
Mm-hmm.
Ex nihilo nihil fit. Out of nothing, nothing comes. There's a threefold progression here.
Okay, and that's another thing. They completely misunderstand the concept of the Big Bang. They think nothing exploded and became everything. I was literally taught that in church, that atheists believe nothing exploded and became everything. Well, of course that's ridiculous, but it's not that. It was a slow expansion of an initial singularity into the universe as we know it today. And it's a little...
That's the thing that infuriates me the most, though, is that so many Christians don't want to know what we actually believe, right? They don't want to actually understand our position. What they want to do is they just want to straw man it, right? I actually want to understand what Christians believe, right? Like when I'm talking to a Christian, I actually want to know what they're believing. I don't want to try to straw man them.
My question is, it's annoying to me when they say nothing, because obviously it wasn't just absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of like public debates and whatnot, and a lot of the atheist debater would, who was also into science, like Lawrence Krauss, for example. I remember there was one debate where he actually went along with the nothing thing, and in my head, I don't know. And then he went on to explain that when science says nothing, it's not the way we understand nothing.
Yeah.
It's just for that, I don't know. I feel like the better argument to say there is just to say, oh, it's just not nothing. Just stop calling it nothing instead of saying nothing and then going like, oh, well, it means something different. I think it's better
Yeah.
just to say, well, there's actually something there.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Like, I feel like language sometimes harms science in some ways because like we use theory in regular language different than we use science, right? And that gets used against scientists all the time. And same with nothing, right? Like it might mean something else to Lawrence Krauss. I think you should just find another word for that, right?
Yeah. I think he uses nothing as in like there was no matter. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest.
Yeah.
Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Anything that begins to exist has a cause at some point. The universe began to exist, so the universe has a cause. But the big...
I haven't heard that one before. This is new to me.
See, here's another thing. I don't like the first premise that everything that came to exist has a cause. I never liked that one premise to begin with, but the second premise is also so flawed because sure, some people might believe in hypotheses that the universe came into existence from something else, but at the same time, there's also other hypotheses that the universe didn't just come from nothing. It was always here, and it just went through a series of contractions and expansions. And the Big Bang just so happened to be one of these expansions. That's also another hypothesis. So it's not like, I don't know. It's just they're just assuming this, and then science isn't even confirming that.
Yeah.
And nobody's really confirming that at all. That the universe actually just came into existence.
Yeah. I mean, and truly, essentially, when we get down to it, we don't know the exact cause of the Big Bang or the beginning of the universe. And science really can't tell us. We don't really know if science will ever be able to tell us. But that doesn't mean that your God fits there.
Yeah.
Bang requires that the universe began to exist, but it was created out of nothing, which is pretty awkward for evolutionary atheism, because we must believe the universe came from nothing and by nothing, which makes no sense.
I agree, that makes no sense, but it's also not what we believe.
Notice how Christians, I guess creationists as well, they just like to focus a lot about evolution and Big Bang theory. They like to shift the topic to science rather than themselves not like providing evidence of any sort. They think that criticizing the one position is somehow going to make their own position stronger.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, he was saying that, all these things and the scientific explanations is what made Scientific Sam disbelieve in God. So it kind of makes sense in that context, I think.
Yeah, I suppose. I like science for doing that.
So they'll also say the same thing about us, saying that atheists or anti-theists will criticize religion but not offer anything of their own. So you could...
Right. But I mean, if you criticize it, if you have reasons not to believe in a religion, then you can be an atheist, because an atheist is just not believing in a religion. It's not a hard stance that you necessarily have to defend, unless you do take it to that extreme.
Yeah, I
two
think...
different subjects, though, right? Like,
yeah.
Two different subjects. Like, if somebody's talking about, like, if I'm talking about criticizing a belief in the Christian God, that's different than a conversation I'd be having about morality or how the universe began. Like, they're all different conversations that don't necessarily link. Like, I don't link my ethics with Christianity. They do.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, it is past my time, so I shall be leaving now.
All right, it's Stick's bedtime. He's got to go.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a nap. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for having me on.
All right, thanks for being here.
Fun.
Anybody's interested in Professor Stick, link to his channel in the description below if you haven't already subscribed. But thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'd be leaving early. Fuck them.
All right, that's it.
See you later, Stick.
Bye.
Bye.
Good riddance. Fuck you. He's gone. We can say whatever we want. All right.
nothing, nothing comes. Aristotle said nothing is what rocks dream about. It's nothing. So I know we got some NASA guys on the other side here.
Aristotle said what?
Nothing is what rocks dream about. It's sort of like an explanation of what nothing really is. But again, the universe didn't come from nothing, so it's kind of a moot point.
Think what rocks dream about. That's because rocks aren't conscious. They don't dream about anything.
Exactly. So that's like what true nothing is. That was kind of the point of that. It's not like a religious
still
argument.
Right, but this thing would still exist. Like the rock is still there.
Yeah.
Nothing. It would just be that nobody's there to observe that nothing.
Right.
Observe that thing, I guess.
Right.
Okay, whatever. I'm sorry. I got sidetracked.
Okay.
Robert Zastrow, he said the details differ, but the essential elements in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis are the same. This is an exceedingly strange development, unexpected by all but the theologians. They have always believed the word of the Bible, but we scientists did not expect to find evidence for an abrupt beginning because we have had, until recently, such extraordinary success in tracing the chain of cause and effect backward in time. At this moment, it seems as though science will never be able to raise the curtain on the mystery of creation. For the scientist who's lived by faith and in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He's scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he's greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries.
God of the gaps.
This dude should work for I forget what that's called, like a like $2, $3, $3. I forget what that's called.
Auctioneer.
Yeah, this guy should be an auctioneer. I can barely understand what he's saying. I'm like squinting at the screen trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible. He's trying to talk faster than he can, and this is only like a half an hour sermon, which maybe he's used to it being longer. They're usually like an hour or 2 hours. So maybe he's just trying to speak faster than he can.
So just point to creation, point to design, how God leaves the imprints of his glory upon the design of the earth. So we know this is what the Bible teaches to be true, that God's revealed in such a way that his attributes are clear in creation.
To you. They're clear to you.
I'll see how clear. I don't understand when theists say that. Like, it's clear. If it's clear, then I don't see it. Then it's not clear. Like,
yeah, but the thing is, it's clear to them. Here's the thing. Here's the confusion. They believe in a God who made everything. So when they see everything, they interpret it in a way that, oh, God made this. That's amazing. How God made this. And they don't understand that other people are interpreting it in a totally different way. There's a word for it, but it's hard for people to understand that others don't think in a different way that they do.
Well, he probably wouldn't be thinking that if he was out in the Amazon jungle without a gun or anything, with his soft little hands, like he'd be somebody's lunch, and then you'd be like, oh, God made all this for me. Oh look, there's a snake.
Yeah.
I love Paul Davies, one-time agnostic. Through my scientific work, I've come to believe more and more strongly that the physical universe is put together with ingenuity so astonishing that I cannot accept it merely as brute fact. So to speak with awe about the design of the universe, the fact that it points to the designer, the fact that the earth, if it were just ever so closer to the sun, we'd burn up in an instant. If we were ever so far away from the, just slightly farther away from the sun, we would freeze in an instant. We're held by a designer, a someone.
No.
So life could be different. Like, we could be further away from the sun and there still be life. Like,
yeah,
we could, the oceans could be covered in ice and there'd be water underneath. There could be life there, right? Like,
yeah.
The Goldilocks zone is bigger than, this guy is making it out to be.
So. Oh yeah. And there are like billions of planets in each of billions of galaxies. So just by the numbers, we can tell that in our galaxy alone, there's like billions of other planets in this Goldilocks zone. So the fact that there are so many planets, it just makes more likely for life to form on just one of them. But I lost my train of thought.
Could also be other forms. Like if they're always bringing up the constants, right?
Yeah.
If you shifted gravity a little bit, then it would be different life. Like, but there could be different life, right? That doesn't.
Right.
It might not necessarily be the same kind of life we have now here on planet Earth.
Life as we know it wouldn't have formed, but this is what life can form, and that's what did. And it's also funny when they say that, the universe was designed in order to house life, to house people. But the vast majority of the universe is completely hostile to life. Why are we only limited to this tiny little sliver that, is doomed to die in time anyway?
All made for us, though.
Yeah.
What's so interesting, I got to give you a little context. This quote from Charles Missner, who was commenting on Albert Einstein's skepticism toward religion, talking about Einstein, this brilliant scientist who had studied so much in the world. Missner said, the design of the universe is very magnificent, shouldn't be taken for granted. In fact, I believe that's why Einstein had so little use for organized religions, although he strikes me as a basically very religious man. He must have looked at what the Christians said about God and felt that they were blaspheming. He'd seen much more majesty than they'd ever imagined, and they were just not talking about the real thing. My guess is he simply felt the religions he'd run across didn't have proper respect for the author of the universe.
From everything I've read, I get the idea that Einstein believed in the Spinozan God, which is like pantheism.
Yeah.
So when he said God, he wasn't talking about like some. He was just talking about the universe and like what makes up the universe.
Right. Yeah. And he wasn't claiming that Einstein was a Christian or anything. There's somebody commenting on Einstein, but
they talk about God as if there's like he's talking about the same kind of God that he's talking about, which is not the.
Yeah, right. But this whole argument is that the universe is so great, so amazing. God must have done it. It doesn't connect. It doesn't connect.
Oh, do you realize who we worship? We worship the God who Isaiah 40 calls the stars by name.
Have you ever looked at the names of stars? Some of them are really boring. They have numbers in them. Like, come on. He could do something a little bit more interesting.
All right. So when sharing the gospel with a scientific stand, let the limitations of science become a bridge to begin to talk about the realistic possibility of a creator who caused creation.
Right. So science isn't perfect, so God fills in the gaps. We've heard this argument before. It's not convincing anyone.
Designer responsible for our design. This is actually not far-fetched at all. Not any more far-fetched than the silence that science ultimately gives in the face of those questions. Sharing the gospel with Mark, a moral atheist, disenfranchised by the morality or lack thereof in religions. Pictured more of as power play for authority. And so to say, I have no desire to defend the morality of every religion in the world, specifically the religious people.
Another thing that really pisses me off about religions is that they preach this kind of like hatred towards science, right? Like they're like this disparagement against it. Meanwhile, he's in a church that's powered by science, that's heated by science, cooled by science.
Yeah.
Getting video, like everything that's around him has been built by science in the last few hundred years, right? Like it's ridiculous what they've accomplished in a few hundred years compared to what his religion has accomplished throughout thousands, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what, that wall behind him isn't made by science. It's made by like fifth graders or something. But you know what it is? The science that made all of that stuff in there, that's observational science. The science that tells us about evolution, that's historical science. Historical science doesn't tell us anything.
I mean, no atheist that I know of or I've ever spoken to was like doesn't have limitations. Like it obviously does.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's a bad method or that it's worse than just asserting a supernatural thing, right? Like a cause.
Right.
If you're going to assert a supernatural cause, then you have to show evidence for it existing in the first place.
Yeah. But that's kind of what they're trying to do, to push you away from science. Science doesn't give you the answer. Look to something that does have answers. You don't have to interpret it in a scientific context. Just, it makes sense. It explains everything. But that's how they think, and not how we think. And I guess that's kind of difficult for them to grasp sometimes.
Been around, have caused questions in your life. But to get down to that, so your life, Mark, do you believe in right and wrong? And I'm thinking the answer is yes. And so to ask, why do you have a sense of right and wrong? Where did that come from?
Oh, Lord.
Or how do you know the difference between right and wrong?
It's intuitions. It's in the same vein as emotions. You can't.
Is that they don't want to be able to, they don't want to have to think about it, right? Like they just want to be able to have, like, this is right, this is wrong, and it scares them that things are uncertain, right?
Oh yeah.
And life is uncertainty. Like life is, there's a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Throughout your entire life.
And it's also like, as well, is if you're Christian, then you've probably been taught your entire life that God decides what's right and what's wrong. So it's hard for them to like step out of that, to think that, for some people, God isn't what decides that, because they believe their morality is given by God. It's hard for them to think that anyone else would think otherwise.
Yeah, and also I don't understand, another thing I don't understand is how they come to the conclusion that if morality is based on God, that it's objective, because God would be the subject.
Yeah.
So it would be his subjective opinion that this is wrong. Now, granted, a God that's omnipotent and all that would have more knowledge and be able to probably be able to figure out what's right and wrong better than we could. But that doesn't mean that it's objective. It would still be subjective, right? So
yeah, and like Cosmic Skeptic said in one of his recent videos, even if God does decide what's right and wrong, why would we decide to agree with that? Why would we decide to follow it, whether we agreed with it or not? So either way, we do have subjective morality.
Yeah, like you could disagree with is saying. I don't know. Like I think that's a deep discussion. Like I don't, like, again, like this God would have access to far more information. Like a God that would be like that would be able to like go through all the simulations in its head about what, if I did this, what would be the ramifications, 3,000 years down the road, kind of thing. Whereas I can't do that. So it'd probably be able to make better decisions than I could, obviously. Well, not probably, it would be able to. So you could argue that, yes, but you still have to prove that being would exist in order to, so.
And those questions lead to bridges to crossing conversation about how the existence of objective moral values points to a moral creator. It's what Paul talks about in Romans.
But we don't have objective moral values. Sorry?
The Bible, the God of the Bible sounds really dumb. Like, I mean, like, like it doesn't give me the impression that it could way to do things, right? Like
right.
Especially in the Old Testament, like there's times where he's like, "Where are you, Adam and Eve? Where are you?" Like you would know that. If you, like,
there are times he's telling us not to kill. Times he's telling the Israelites to go to war. He changed his mind like constantly. So why would we even think that the God of the Bible has objective morality?
Exactly. And if there was a true objective morality, it would be outside of God. So it would exist whether God existed or not. And if this God is all good, then it would want to follow these objective laws.
Mm-hmm.
And you could show that it's, if killing killing is bad, God commands killing. So
right.
either breaking the objective value, or he's not all good, right? Because if he's breaking it, and he's supposedly all good, then he can't be all good. Like,
right.
The whole thing doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think the justification is God had a good reason for killing all the people he killed, but we don't have a good reason. Mysterious ways. That's what it is. That's all it ever is. Mysterious ways.
Too.
Objective moralities wouldn't an objective moral standard wouldn't really take into things that would happen because of that, right? Like it would just be like, this is wrong, this is right. If you do this, then that's good. If you do that, it's bad, right? The parts where you start going, okay, well, if we do this, like lying is bad, but if you lie to save Jews from being killed by the Nazis, that's okay. That's subjective, right? Like that's like me making a decision based on outcomes.
Yeah.
The fact that we have a moral law.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Written on our hearts, by which we know something is good or bad, actually points to a moral lawgiver. To begin talking about how if God doesn't exist, then good and evil do not exist. At least not any innate sense of good and evil, right and wrong, because there's no objective basis for determining between the two. Any atheist knows this. Look,
Why does there have to be an objective morality, though?
I can tell you what I think is good and what is evil, or what is good and bad, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't need objective morality to do that. All you need is a conscious
Yeah.
experience to say, I don't like it when you steal from me, therefore I think it's bad, right? Like, that's
Yeah. And like I said before, the fact that people disagree on what's moral. We disagree on whether abortion is legal. We disagree on like certain rights that we should or shouldn't have, where the lines are drawn. The fact that we disagree shows that, to some degree, it's subjective.
Well, even when you have that conversation, like the abortion conversation with a Christian, right? They might bring up, yeah, God said so, which in the Bible doesn't really make sense, and given nature really doesn't make sense, because God would have created women that abort their fetuses without being even aware of it sometimes. Yeah. But besides that, once you get past that hurdle, most of the time you're talking about reasons about why you think it is, right? So most of the time the Christian will say, well, that's a human life, so therefore it has value, which is a subjective moral claim, right? And somebody else is saying, well, no, it's not conscious yet. It doesn't have a nervous system. It can't feel suffering. That's a reason. They're reasoning through why they think something is right and something is wrong, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
They're doing what atheists do.
Yeah.
Get this quote from Dinesh D'Souza.
From who? Who's Dinesh D'Souza?
Dinesh D'Souza. He's like a conservative.
Yeah, I couldn't hear. I couldn't hear what
him a thinker. I don't want to call him a thinker, but
yeah, I just couldn't understand what this guy was saying.
For purely
too, so.
Yeah.
Material, in other words, just natural physical beings, then we should no more object to mass murder than a river objects to drying up in a drought. Our ability to distinguish between good and evil and to recognize it is real means that there is a moral standard in the universe that provides the basis for this distinction. And what is the source of that moral standard?
So dumb. Like, that's like the dumbest thing. Like, I don't know what he said about. So he said something like, distinction between mass murder and something. I am assuming something that's not that big a deal. But of course there is, because it's a big deal, because I don't want to get murdered. Right?
Yeah.
I don't want other people to get murdered. I don't want my friends. I don't want my family to get murdered. So why would I want to live in a society that says, yeah, mass murder is cool. You know, that's good. That's fine. Right? Like, it's against my own self-interest, if nothing else. Right? Like, it's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah. And just because lots of people agree with it doesn't mean that there was, a God to set that as the case. I mean, like, think about, like, colors. If we see the same picture and we can both understand that, oh, this picture is green, the fact that we can all agree that there's this is objectively green, that doesn't mean that there was a green giver, that somebody had to give us the ability to distinguish what color is exactly which. It can just be that way.
Yeah, exactly. But everything that he's describing has to do with consciousness and how we experience it, right? Like, you could find somebody like maybe a mass killer or serial killer that would say, yeah, I want a society where I can just go around killing people and not get into trouble, right? Like, he might have, like, at some point might change his mind. Like, just say he's like 60 years old and he doesn't want to get killed, right? Because he can't defend himself any longer. So maybe he's like, well, you know what? I don't want that society anymore. So he would be making a selfish choice saying this is wrong, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, his entire life, he could have wanted that thing. So even no matter how you look at it, like no matter which way you look at it, it's always based on your conscious experiences and what kind of society you want to live in. What do you want to promote as good and bad, right? Like, do you want to live in a society that, like, conservatives and liberals will argue about the social safety net, right? Like, so liberals are saying, well, we want this social program because we don't want these people to be left without, right? And then conservatives might say, well, no, that's their own fault, right? Like, so they're both making subjective reasons about why they want this one thing compared to another, and then they argue it out, and eventually they'll come to some kind of resolution.
Yeah.
and you'll have a new social norm, right?
Right. Yeah. But no, there's there's only one thing. There's only one right and wrong, and God gave it to us.
If not God. So an atheistic worldview provides no objective basis for distinguishing between good and evil.
We don't claim that it does.
Michael Roos, noted agnostic philosopher of science, said the position of the modern evolutionists is that morality is a biological adaptation no less than our hands and feet and teeth. Considered as a rationally justifiable set of claims about an objective something, ethics is illusory. I appreciate that when somebody says love thy neighbor as thyself, they think they're referring above and beyond themselves. Nevertheless, such reference is truly without foundation. Morality is just an aid to survival and reproduction, and any deeper meaning is illusory. Same.
Love your neighbor. That line is so annoying to me because there are instances where loving your neighbor is a bad idea, right? Like if my neighbor wants to come over here and rape my fiance and kill me and kill my dogs, right? Loving him like I love myself would be a very dumb move, right?
Yeah.
It's my best interest.
Right.
So,
yeah.
It's just an oversimplified catchphrase that makes the Christian look good, right? Like, oh, love thy neighbor, that's what I'm promoting. What's wrong with that, right? But if you really think about it, it's not true.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way.
Thing.
You could say like loving other people or like promoting is a good thing to do, and I would go along with that, I suppose. But term everybody, I have to love everybody the same. It's even against reality because I'm incapable of doing that. I can't love Joe Blow if I don't know him the same as I love myself or the same as I love my fiance, right? Like there's going to be different spectrums. I would still acknowledge his humanity and care about him in that respect, but not him, right? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
They're atheist ethicists. We've not been able to show that reason requires a moral point of view or that all really rational persons should not be individual egoists or classical amoralists. Reason doesn't decide here. The picture I've painted for you is not a pleasant one. Reflection on it depresses me. Pure practical reason, even with the knowledge of the facts, will not take you to morality. So when you...
So morality doesn't come from reasoning. So what? We know that morality is a feeling. It's more of a preference.
It's both, right? Like you can reason about your feelings, or like I said, like we can have an ethical discussion and we're using reason. Some of that might be based on intuitions, right? Like we have intuitions that murdering is wrong. It goes against our nature to murder people because that's why a lot of people get PTSD when they have to kill other people, right? So we know it's basically not generally against our nature to go around killing other human beings. But we can also reason about that and say, like, okay, we already have laws that are reasoned through, right? Is it okay to kill somebody if they're trying to kill you? Yes, that's fine, right? Like,
yeah.
So we've already reasoned a way, every possible way that a human can die. We even have like manslaughter is not as bad because it's unintentional than it is to intentionally murder somebody, right? So we've already reasoned that out.
Yeah. But I mean, if God did give us an objective right or wrong, that would make this so much easier. We don't have to disagree. We don't have to have these arguments. We don't have to... it's so much easier. It's an easier explanation. Not a better explanation, but it's an easier explanation. So maybe that's what he's going for, just to...
Definitely what they're going for, but it's also, like, if... They still haven't gotten over the hurdle of proving that their God exists, because if it was just some human way back, 4,000 years ago that wrote this down, that's their subjective view of what morality was, and they just attributed it to a God, and now you've adopted it, right? So you've done nothing more than just adopted another human subjective view, which is what we all do anyway, right? If there's no God. So...
Someone said in the chat, I have a question. How much coke does one have to snort in order to be able to read aloud at the pace this guy is doing it?
I don't know. It's crazy. Funny story, though, when I first started YouTube, the first videos that I made, I cut out the pauses in between sentences because it was like me breathing or something.
Yeah.
And so like it all sounded like this guy. Like it would just sound like, and also because I didn't want people to have to sit through like actually relevant, so I cut it down. But then I would get comments like, how how fast are you talking, man? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I used to do that at first. I would sort of like strategically try to leave in pauses, and it was much easier when I wasn't actually like recording my face, when it's just my voice and a stick figure. But even I think, yeah, just recently, well, not terribly recently. It's been about a month, but there was a video I posted where I found this video of this guy who was talking real slow, like the exact opposite of this guy. So I sped up the video, like I played it at 1.25% speed, and everybody was complaining about it. Like, oh, it sounds terrible. So, yeah, I've learned that it's better to talk slow than to be the opposite direction, even if it's still annoying.
yeah, that's true.
Recognize that, you realize atheism is left with hopeless subjectivity that's dependent upon the whims of changing society, where culture determines what's right and wrong. And as long as culture says something's okay, then it's okay, which sounds good to some, at least at first, but think about the implications. And this is where it's helpful in conversation with Mark to show.
Think about the implications. So are we arguing from consequence? You haven't like proven that this is the case. Are you just arguing from consequence?
The implications of an atheistic approach to morality are frightening. Taken to their end, far more frightening than any other religion he's grown disillusioned by. Is he really prepared to say that as long as Nazi German culture said it was okay?
There it is. You brought up Nazis.
There we go.
I was waiting for it.
You called it.
Of course. It's only a matter of time.
Okay to
The
exterminate
thing is
Jewish.
that Nazi Germany happened in a Christian country, in a Christian area, right?
Yeah. And people are saying, yeah, and it's always funny when people say like, oh, this is what atheism causes. Well, here's how many people were Christian in the Third Reich. But
like, like a lot of atheists will argue that Hitler was Christian, and really it doesn't matter whether he was or he wasn't, right? The fact is that he used Christianity to push his message, right?
Yeah.
So in a Christian country, so you're surrounded by like 90% of people are Christian. He still found enough people to staff the camps, still found enough people to go to war for him. Christianity didn't stop it. And in fact, you could easily make the argument that it helped it because, Catholics, for instance, preached anti-Semitism for centuries, right? So it was much easier in a Christian country that's largely Catholic to, the Jews and say, look, those people are evil, right? And their religion backed them up. So it's ridiculous that he brings up... Christians should never bring up Nazi Germany. Like, I get them bringing up Stalin or whatever, because at least that had, like, Stalin was like, hey, religion bad or whatever. So
yeah. But even that was state atheism, and there aren't...
Still a bad example, but it makes way more sense than Nazi Germany.
Yeah, right. But, his argument is that, if morality is, subjective and based on a culture, then a culture could decide to, do the Holocaust. But that's exactly what happened. That happened because morality is subjective in such a way. The very fact that Nazi Germany existed shows that that's how morality is.
And I'm sure there were lots of Germans that opposed it, right? And maybe some of them used their Christianity to reason their way to opposing it as well. But stop it shows that the Christian religion is fairly not good at doing. Yeah, if you think of all the atrocities that have happened while Christianity's been around, you come to the realization that it doesn't do anything to really stop these atrocities. It either just sits by and lets it happen or promotes it in some way, right? Like slavery. Right. So to say that that's the scary thing is that, well, if of course, if everybody was an atheist, bad things would probably still happen, right? And based on bad reasons. But that's not a case for Christianity, because the same thing happens under Christianity, probably more so than if you're using supernatural premises. You can just explain away anything, right?
Right.
People that made it okay. Listen to Richard Dawkins, noteworthy atheist. In a universe of blind physical forces
Noteworthy.
and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, other people are going to get lucky. You won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA that neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. Can you imagine telling the victims of Auschwitz, sorry, Hitler
Oh my
and
God.
these Nazi soldiers were just dancing to their DNA. They're neither evil nor good. It's just blind, pitiless indifference that neither knows nor cares. Or present day.
Argument from consequence. Are you?
Emotion, because he's like
Oh, yeah.
basically saying, well, you know, that'll make them feel bad. So
Oh yeah, for sure. But I mean, it's just like, oh, if this is how it is, then you know, this is what happens. This is the result of that. You wouldn't want that. It's an argument from consequence. You haven't shown us that that's not how it is. You've done the opposite.
like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Laughably, it's, I don't know, I always think of like whenever I have these conversations, and I've said this on Twitter to like people, like it just seems like they're moral toddlers. Like they can't get past the basic precepts of morality that I learned when I was 5, right, from my parents. Like when you beat up your sister, right, or your brother or something like that, and then your parents came along and said, you know, why is that not a good thing to do, right? Most people would say, well, you know, most kids were like, well, it felt good to beat up my sister or my brother, right? And your parents would say, okay, well, how do you think your sister felt? Well, probably not so good. Probably not a good idea to do that then, right? Yeah. Well, now you're going to get punished for it. And you get punished, and you learned why, right? Like,
Yeah.
It's easy reasoning, right? Like
Yeah.
they never go after the hard subjects that are, because they have lots of gray areas, right? Like you know,
Right.
obviously beating up your sister is not much of a gray area. Right?
Yeah.
Dads of little girls in West Africa who were kidnapped by Boko Haram, have been forcibly raped, married off to militant Muslim captors who are now training them to be suicide bombers. They're just dancing to their DNA.
Religion.
I'm sorry, what was that?
They're dancing to their religion. They're
Essentially.
that's where they draw their inspiration, right? Like
Yeah.
they've taken, like, there's an article, I forget in what magazine, but it was written a while ago, like maybe 10 years ago, and they laid out these Islamic terrorists, like I think it was ISIS, laid out why they do the things they do, and like all through it it said, because you are unbelievers, right? Like,
Yeah.
over and over and over again. And then people read that and were like, I wonder why they're doing it. It can't be because they're unbelievers. No, it's exactly why. They just laid it out for you. Like, reason number 1 was you are unbelievers, right? Reason number 2, you will bow to us, or you will pay the jizya, right?
Yeah.
So basically, we're going to enslave you and tax you for not believing in our religion. Or, you know, blah, blah. And then they're like, at the bottom was like, well, because you bombed our country. It's like, that was like the least. And then even one of them said, that reason, don't think of it as a big reason. That's not the biggest reason why we're doing it. That's just one small aspect, right? Like, and I couldn't believe, like I would talk to people and I would show them the article and they'd be like, that can't be why. No, it can't be that. Believable to me.
Yeah.
We can't conclude. We don't want to conclude that there is no God. See the implications. They can be seen only in the context of humble dialogue, questioning, honest questioning, gospel conversations.
In the context of emotional manipulation. That's all that is.
It's all
So-
religion is, really.
True.
Then what about sharing the gospel with the insignificant Isabel? First, there is no God, she said. Second, I'm an insignificant part of the universe. Third, when I die, I'm dead. No ifs, ands, or buts. No invisible super parent. Scary, naked feeling at first, but I'm on my own. I just want to make the best of the one chance at bad I have. So ask questions. If the universe is ultimately impersonal, and therefore we're all insignificant, then why do we have such a personal desire for meaningful relationships like you mentioned?
Because you have conscious experiences and you want it makes you feel good to have meaningful relationships.
Right, yeah.
Like that's what I mean, moral toddler. Like, who can't figure that out for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, we've evolved to be social creatures, so of course socialization will be important to us, and helping other people. Yeah, they can very well feel subjectively important to us, but that doesn't that doesn't mean that there's a bigger purpose, like in the universe or in the cosmos, anything bigger than just what I personally want out of my life.
Even when you take like some of the worst, like what we would agree would be like some of the worst people on earth, right? Like murderers and stuff like that. You take them and stick them in isolation. What happens to them? They go insane, like because even they, the most antisocial of us still need so you need meaningful relationships.
Yeah.
So even babies, like if you like, I forget where it was. I want to say over in Europe somewhere, but they had like a whole bunch of babies being looked after by nuns or whatever, but there wasn't enough nuns to look after the babies. So a lot of the babies just laid in the cribs and they just died because they had all the food they needed and all that kind of stuff, but they didn't have enough human contact. So they just died. That's the way our species is built.
Yeah. But it doesn't point to anything grander than just us.
It's just the way we're wired as a species.
Yeah.
And where does that come from? If we really are insignificant in the whole of creation, then why do we have such a strong desire inside of us for significance? Maybe another way to put that question, if we really aren't insignificant in the whole creation, then where does that strong desire for significance come from?
It comes from ourselves. We don't need a God to want socialization or to be important to our community or what have you. You don't need a God to give yourself meaning, and that's essentially what we do.
Maybe
Like, who wants to think of themselves as insignificant, right? Like,
Exactly.
like regular people are like, well, no, I'm significant. Like, they might have varying degrees of how significant they think they are, but they all think that they have worth, right? So, I want to smash my head against the desk right now.
We're not done yet.
another way to get at the heart of what we all feel, want, desire, for some reason to ask, is there part of you that desires ultimate justice in the world? Transcendent meaning beyond this world? I.e., when you see sex trafficking and terrorism and poverty and oppression and injustice, isn't there something in you that says, surely this is not all there is?
Why would those things make me feel like there's more than there is, right? Like, that is what is.
Yeah.
There's not more than there is.
Yeah, like it makes you comfortable to think that there's something behind it all and that there will be some sort of resolution. But I just don't see that there is.
But there's nothing behind that, and so we need to do something about it now. Not wait till after you die.
Yeah.
And if so, where does that desire come from? So to get to the heart and then begin to cross the bridge and to show in the gospel how our search for significance comes from a personal creator who's made us in his image. Our longing for love comes from a loving creator. This wonderful gift we have of love that even Isabel talks about and the relationships we have with other people, this love is a gift. It's the most excellent way ultimately because there is a God who is love. To show how our desire...
Some people are incapable of feeling love. So, what was God doing there? Did he fall down? Or?
He didn't give as much purpose and meaning to that person as everyone else.
He just left that part out.
Yeah, you skipped over that bit a little bit. You said you had to go soon? How soon?
Like in 15 minutes?
15 minutes? Well, I think this may be a good time to end the stream here.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me on. It was fun.
Yeah. And if
Like
you guys watching enjoyed it, we'll have more of these. Like I said, links to their channels in the description. Thank you for those who donated. And I'll see you perhaps next episode. Goodbye.